The great chamber of the Galactic Council had seen many things in its 12,000 years of existence. It had witnessed the end of wars that burned across entire star systems. It had heard the cries of dying civilizations and the celebrations of newborn alliances. But in all those long millennia, the chamber had never known a silence quite like this one. High Counselor Maveth stood at the central platform, his gray scales catching the light of 1,000 holographic displays. Each display showed the same thing, an empty communication channel, a signal sent into the void, a message that would never receive an answer. 30 years, Maveth said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. 30 years we have called out to them. 30 years of silence. The representatives of 400 species filled the curved seats that rose around him, like waves frozen in stone. Some were ancient beings of crystal and light. Others were creatures of flesh and blood, wrapped in environmental suits that let them breathe the air of their distant homes. All of them shared the same expression: fear, confusion, and something that looked very much like shame. Perhaps we should try again, suggested Ambassador Kreth of the Velthri hegemony. His voice carried the confidence of a species that had conquered 60 worlds. Perhaps this time they will respond. A bitter laugh echoed through the chamber. It came from Elder Thyrus, the oldest being in the room. She had lived for 4,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall like seasons changing, and she had never forgotten the day that everything changed. You speak of trying again, Thyrus said, as if repetition could erase what we have done. Tell me, Ambassador Kreth, do you remember what your hegemony did to earn this silence? Kreth's confidence flickered like a dying flame. That was a different time, a different situation, was it? Thyrus rose from her seat, her ancient body moving with surprising grace. Let me remind this council of the events that brought us to this moment. Let me tell the story that so many of you have tried so hard to forget. The chamber fell silent. Even the environmental systems seemed to hold their breath. 200 years ago, Thyrus began. Humanity took their first steps beyond their star. They came to us with open hands and open hearts. They brought gifts, music that made the crystalline singers weep with joy, stories that spoke to something deep within every species that heard them, philosophy that challenged our oldest assumptions and made us think in ways we had forgotten. She paused, letting the memories settle over the assembly like falling snow. And how did we greet them? With suspicion, with fear, with the arrogance of civilizations that had forgotten what it meant to be young. Ambassador Kreth shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He knew what was coming. The Velthri hegemony proposed a quarantine. Thyrus continued. They argued that humanity was too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be allowed free movement among the stars. And this council, in its infinite wisdom, agreed. Holographic images flickered to life around the chamber. They showed a fleet of 400 warships, the pride of the Velthri Navy, surrounding a small yellow star. Earth's sun, sold at double quotes for 100 ships, Thyrus said. 400 vessels of war, sent to cage a species that had done nothing but offer friendship. The humans sent a single message in response. One word, just one. The recording played. A human voice, calm and clear, spoke into the void. Leave. The Velthri laughed. Thyrus said. They thought it was a bluff. They thought humanity had nothing that could challenge their might. They were wrong. The next images were harder to watch. Ships drifting without power. Weapons systems torn away as if by invisible hands. Crews floating unconscious in vessels that had been reduced to harmless shells. In less than 6 hours, not one human ship was seen, Thyrus said. Not one weapon was fired. Not one life was taken. The humans could have destroyed that fleet. They could have burned those 400 ships down to atoms. Instead, they simply removed them. Like a parent taking a dangerous toy from a child, she turned to face the full council, her ancient eyes burning with something that might have been anger or might have been sorrow. And then the humans went silent. They retreated behind their borders. They stopped answering our calls. They refused our ambassadors. They returned our gifts unopened. For 30 years, we have begged them to speak to us. For 30 years, they have said nothing. High Counselor Maveth stepped forward. Elder Thyrus, we are all aware of this history. The question before us is what to do now. How do we break through their silence? "That is not the question," Thyrus replied. "The question is whether we deserve to have that silence broken." A murmur ran through the chamber. Such words had never been spoken here before. "We treated them as children," Thyrus continued. "We treated them as threats. We sent warships to their doorstep because their hope and energy frightened us. And when they showed us mercy, when they spared lives they had every right to take, we learned nothing. We made excuses. We told ourselves that we had acted reasonably. We refused to admit that we had been wrong." She pointed at the empty communication displays. "This silence is not punishment. It is consequence. Humanity looked at us, at everything we claimed to be, and they decided we were not worth talking to. They did not declare war. They did not demand revenge. They simply stopped believing in us." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then a young voice spoke up. It belonged to Savath, a Kathrani diplomat who had barely reached her first century of life. "What if someone went to them?" she asked, not with demands, not with offers, just to be there, to show them that we are willing to wait, to listen, to learn. Ambassador Kreth laughed. "You would sit at their border like a beggar at a feast. That is your solution. It is better than sitting here for another 30 years, pretending that our calls will ever be answered," Savath replied. High Counselor Maveth considered her words. "It would be dangerous. We have no idea how the humans would respond to such a presence." "They responded to the quarantine fleet with mercy," Savath said. "I am willing to take my chances." The council debated for hours. Some argued that the gesture was too small. Others argued that it was too risky. But in the end, they had no better ideas. 30 years of silence had left them desperate. Savath left for the human border the next day. She traveled in a small ship with no weapons and no escort. She carried nothing but food, water, and the hope that somewhere in the vast silence, someone might be willing to listen, that she reached the boundary marker on a cold morning. A simple beacon floated in the empty space between stars, marking the edge of human territory. Beyond it lay the unknown, the quiet, the waiting. Savath powered down her engines and let her ship drift. Then she opened a communication channel and spoke. "My name is Savath. I am here to wait. I am here to listen. I will not leave until someone tells me to go." There was no response. She had not expected one. Days passed. Savath ate her meals alone. She read books. She watched the stars turn slowly around her. Sometimes she talked, just to fill the silence. She told stories about her homeworld. She described the council debates. She admitted her fears and hopes and doubts. Still nothing. Weeks passed. Her food supplies ran low. Her water recycler began to struggle. But Savath did not leave. She had promised to wait, and she would keep that promise. On the 47th day, she woke to find that something had changed. Her sensors showed a ship approaching from human space. It was small and unarmed. It stopped just beyond arm's reach of her vessel. A communication channel opened. A woman's voice spoke, tired and sad and somehow familiar. "Why are you here?" Savath's heart raced. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. She had prepared speeches and arguments and explanations. But now, faced with the reality of contact, all of her preparations fell away. She told the truth. "Because we are dying without you, and we do not understand why." The silence stretched on. Savath closed her eyes and waited for rejection, for anger, for the cold dismissal that 30 years of experience had taught her to expect. Instead, the human voice spoke again. "1. You may send one representative to Earth. Choose carefully. We will not offer this again." The channel closed. The human ship turned and disappeared into the dark between stars. Savath sat alone in her drifting vessel, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in 30 years, someone had answered. For the first time in 30 years, there was hope. But hope, she knew, was just the beginning. The hard work lay ahead. The council had been given one chance to prove itself worthy, one opportunity to show that it could be honest, that it could be humble, that it could be better than it had been. As she turned her ship toward home, Savath wondered if they were capable of such change. 30 years of silence had taught her to be realistic about the council's limitations. But 30 years of silence had also taught her something else. Humanity had waited this long. They had held their peace through decades of ignored calls and empty gestures. They had not given up on the galaxy entirely. Somewhere in that silence, there was still patience. And where there was patience, there might still be room for redemption. The news of Savath's contact spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every world knew that humanity had spoken. One word, one chance, one representative. The council fell into chaos. High Counselor Maveth spent 3 sleepless days trying to manage the flood of demands. Every species wanted to choose the representative. Every faction had their own candidate. Every government believed that they alone understood what humanity needed to hear. We should send a warrior, argued the Thoric commander. Someone who speaks their language of strength. We should send a scientist, countered the Malari delegation. Someone who can appreciate their technological achievements. We should send a philosopher, suggested the crystalline singers. Someone who can match the depth of their thinking. But while the powerful argued over politics, something strange was happening on the outer worlds. Something that none of the council members had predicted. On Kethrani Prime, the markets fell silent. The usual bustle of trade and commerce had stopped. Merchants stood behind empty counters, staring at nothing. Children who had grown up listening to human stories asked their parents why the tales had stopped. Their parents had no answers. On Vulthri colonies, suicide rates climbed for the first time in centuries. The species that had tried to cage humanity now found themselves trapped in a different kind of prison. They had discovered human music 30 years ago, and its absence had left them hollow. On 100 worlds, in 1,000 cities, beings who had never met a human felt the weight of their silence. It was not just the absence of trade or technology. It was something deeper, something harder to name. Elder Thyrus understood. She had lived long enough to recognize what was happening. They gave us hope. She told the council on the 4th day of debates, not in their technology or their weapons, in their stories, in their art, in their belief that tomorrow could be better than today. We had forgotten how to believe in such things. They reminded us. And now that reminder is gone. The Malari ambassador shifted uncomfortably. Surely you exaggerate. Our civilizations existed for millennia before humanity arrived. Existed. Yes, Thyrus replied. But did we live? Did we dream? Did we create anything new under the stars? Or did we simply maintain what our ancestors had built, afraid to change, afraid to grow, afraid to hope for anything more? No one answered. The truth was too painful. Humanity was young. Thyrus continued. They made mistakes. They fought wars. They damaged their own world. But they never stopped believing that they could be better. They never stopped trying. And when they shared that belief with us, we discovered something we had lost. We remembered what it felt like to look at the future with excitement instead of fear. She gestured at the empty communication displays. That is what we are missing. That is why our markets fall silent and our children weep. We had learned to hope again, and now that hope has been taken away. The council debated for 2 more days. In the end, they chose Ambassador Ven of the Marathi. He was old, even by galactic standards. He had served on the council for 300 years. He had no political ambitions and no enemies. Most importantly, he was known for one thing above all else. He could not lie. The Marathi were a strange species. Some quirk of their biology made deception physically impossible for them. They could not speak words that they did not believe to be true. It was a trait that had made them excellent judges and terrible politicians. Ven accepted the assignment without hesitation. I will go, he said. I will see what there is to see. I will tell you what I find. And I will not pretend that anything is other than what it is. He left for Earth the next morning. While Ven traveled, the galaxy continued to suffer. Reports came in from every sector. The Thyrian poetry academies had closed their doors. Without human literature to study and respond to, they had lost their inspiration. The crystalline singers had not performed in months. Their songs had become echoes of echoes, beautiful but empty. On the mining colonies of the Outer Rim, workers stopped showing up for their shifts. What is the point? One of them asked when questioned. We dig up rocks so that we can buy things, but the only things worth buying were human things, human stories, human dreams. What good is money now? The economic collapse was slow but steady. Trade routes that had flourished for centuries began to wither. Factories that produced luxury goods shut down. Banks that had seemed unshakable began to fail. And through it all, the silence continued. High Counselor Maveth ordered studies. Economists analyzed the data. Psychologists examined the symptoms. But all their reports said the same thing. The galaxy had become dependent on something that could not be measured or manufactured. It had become dependent on humanity's spirit. This is absurd. Ambassador Kreth argued during one of the council sessions. We are ancient civilizations. We have technology that humanity cannot even imagine. We have conquered the stars. How can we be so affected by the silence of one young species? Elder Thyrus smiled sadly. Because technology does not fill the emptiness in our hearts. Because conquest does not give us reasons to wake up in the morning. Because for all our power, we had forgotten how to live. And humanity reminded us. Kreth had no response to that. News of Ven's arrival at Earth reached the council 2 weeks later. He had been met at the boundary by a small human delegation. They had welcomed him politely but without warmth. They had taken him to their home world and given him quarters in a city called Geneva. His first report arrived 3 days after that. I do not know what I expected to find here. Ven wrote, perhaps anger, perhaps military preparations, perhaps the signs of a civilization preparing for revenge. I found none of these things. What I found was something I cannot easily describe. The council gathered to hear his words. Earth is beautiful, Ven continued. More beautiful than I had imagined. The humans have spent the last 30 years healing their world. The deserts have become gardens. The dying oceans have come back to life. The cities have been rebuilt with art and color and light. He described floating structures that defied gravity. He described forests that had been restored to their ancient glory. He described children playing in streets that were covered with murals and sculptures, and growing things. But what strikes me most is what is absent, Ven said. There are no weapons, no military bases, no defense stations. The humans have not spent their silence preparing for war. They have spent it creating wonder. High Counselor Maveth frowned. Are they not concerned about defense? About protecting themselves from another attempt at quarantine? Ven's response was delayed by the vast distances between stars. When it came, his voice was heavy with something that might have been wonder or might have been shame. I asked them that question, he said. They laughed, not with cruelty, but with genuine amusement. One of them told me that they stopped worrying about external threats a long time ago. She said that anyone who tried to harm them now would simply fail. She did not explain what that meant. She did not need to. The confidence in her voice was explanation enough. The council sat in uncomfortable silence. They remembered the quarantine fleet. 400 ships, disabled in 6 hours. No one had ever discovered how. I have been given a guide, Ven continued. A child named Ella. She is perhaps 10 years old by human reckoning. She takes me through the city and shows me things without any agenda or manipulation. She simply shares her world. A child? Ambassador Kreth sounded skeptical. They send a child to deal with a diplomatic mission? I believe that is precisely the point, Ven replied. They are not treating this as a diplomatic mission. They are treating it as an opportunity for me to see who they are. And they have chosen their representative accordingly. A child, pure, honest, without the burdens of politics or history. The next report came a week later. It was shorter than the first, but somehow heavier. Today Ella took me to a garden, Ven said. It was built on land that used to be desert, land that humans had damaged through their own carelessness. They spent 50 years restoring it. 50 years of work to heal a wound they had inflicted on themselves. His voice faltered. She asked me a question as we walked among the flowers. She asked why we tried to lock her people away. She said they just wanted to be friends. The recording captured the sound of the old Marathi diplomat struggling to compose himself. I had no answer, Ven said. For the first time in 300 years of service, I had no words. I could not explain our fear. I could not justify our actions. I could not make her understand why we had responded to open hands with closed fists. There was a long pause. I wept, Ven admitted. I wept like I have not wept since I was young. And the child took my hand and stood with me in silence. Until the tears stopped, the council listened without speaking. Some of them had tears in their own eyes. Others simply stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's gaze. I will continue my observations. Ven concluded. But I want you all to know something. I came here expecting to find enemies. I came here expecting to find a civilization that had turned hard and cold in response to our betrayal. Instead, I found something far more challenging. His final words would haunt the council for years to come. I found disappointment, not anger, not hatred. Simple, profound disappointment. Humanity looked at us and saw everything we could have been. And they are still waiting, after all these years. For Ambassador Ven had served the Galactic Council for 300 years. He had walked on worlds of ice and worlds of fire. He had negotiated with species that communicated through light, and species that spoke with gravity itself. He thought he had seen everything the universe had to offer. Earth proved him wrong. His guide Ella arrived each morning with the first light of dawn. She was small for her age, with dark hair that never seemed to stay in place and eyes that held the curiosity of someone who still believed the world was full of wonderful secrets waiting to be discovered. "Good morning, Ambassador," she said on the 5th day of his visit. "Today I want to show you the bridges." Ven followed her through streets that seemed more like gardens than roads. Plants grew from every surface. Flowers bloomed in colors he had never seen. Water flowed through channels built into the walls, creating gentle sounds that made the city feel alive. "When you say bridges," Ven asked, "what exactly do you mean?" Ella grinned. "You will see." They took a transport vehicle to the edge of the city. The ground fell away into a deep valley, wide enough that Ven could barely see the other side. And spanning that valley were bridges unlike anything in the galaxy. They were not made of metal or stone. They were made of light, solid, walkable beams of captured sunshine that arched across the emptiness like frozen rainbows. Thousands of people moved along them, walking and cycling and simply standing to enjoy the view. "How is this possible?" Ven whispered. "I do not know the science," Ella admitted. "My mother works on the maintenance team. She says it has something to do with binding photons together. She says it took 20 years to figure out." Ven stared at the impossible structures. "And you built this during the silence? During the time when you refused to speak to us?" "We built many things during the silence," Ella said. "Come, there's more." Over the following days, she showed him wonders that made his 3 centuries of experience feel like nothing. Cities that floated above the clouds, powered by forces that Ven's instruments could not detect. Forests that had been designed to support thousands of species, creating ecosystems more diverse than any natural environment. Oceans where humans swam alongside creatures that had once been endangered, now thriving in waters that had been cleansed of all pollution. "You have done all this in 30 years? Ven asked after visiting a mountain that had been transformed into a living sculpture, its slopes covered with terraced gardens that bloomed in perfect patterns. 30 years is a long time," Ella said. "And we had nothing else to do. The grown-ups say that when you cannot talk to someone, you have to find other ways to spend your energy." Ven noticed that she always said the grown-ups when discussing the silence, as if it was not her decision, as if she had inherited a situation she did not fully understand. "What do the grown-ups say about why the silence began?" he asked carefully. Ella's face grew serious. It was strange to see such gravity in someone so young. "They say that the galaxy was not ready to be our friend. They say that the other species were scared of us, and that scared people do dangerous things." "And what do you think?" She considered the question with the honesty that only children possess. "I think it is sad. I have read about the other species, the Thyrians with their poetry, the crystalline singers and their music, the Kethrani explorers who map the empty spaces between stars. They sound interesting. I would like to meet them, even after what they did to your people." Ella looked up at him with those impossibly clear eyes. "My teacher says that people are not the worst thing they have ever done. She says that everyone can change if they want it badly enough. Do you think that is true, Ambassador?" Ven felt the weight of the question settle on his shoulders. He was Marathi. He could not lie, and the truth was more complicated than he knew how to express. "I think it is possible," he said finally, "but I also think it is very difficult, and I think that many people choose not to change because changing is harder than staying the same." Ella nodded slowly. "That is what I thought you would say." They walked in silence for a while. Ven found himself studying everything around him with new eyes. The humans had not just built beautiful things. They had built things with purpose. Everything served a function. Everything contributed to the whole. There was no waste, no excess, no decoration for its own sake. "May I ask you a question?" Ven said. "Of course. Why are there no weapons here? No defense systems? No military presence at all?" Ella tilted her head as if the question confused her. "Why would we need them? Because the galaxy once sent for hundreds ships to trap you. Because there are species out there who might try again. Oh." Ella smiled in a way that seemed almost pitying. "You do not understand. Let me show you something." She took him to a building that looked like all the others on the outside. But inside, it was different. Screens covered every wall, showing information that Ven could not read. Humans sat at stations, monitoring something that he could not comprehend. "This is the watch," Ella explained. "It sees everything in our solar system. Every ship, every signal, every movement." A woman approached them. She was middle-aged by human standards, with gray in her hair and lines around her eyes. She wore no uniform, just simple clothes that might have belonged to a teacher or a gardener. "Ambassador," she said. "I am Petra, Ella's mother. I understand you have questions about our defenses." Ven straightened. "I mean no offense. I am simply trying to understand." Petra smiled. It was not a threatening smile, but there was something behind it that made Ven uncomfortable. "Let me explain something. 30 years ago, when the Velthri fleet surrounded our star, we made a choice. We could have destroyed them. We had that capability even then. But we chose a different path." She gestured at the screens. "We developed systems that you cannot see. Systems that do not need weapons to function. If any ship enters our space with hostile intent, it will simply stop working. No explosions, no deaths, just silence." "The quarantine fleet," Ven said. "That is what happened to them. Yes, and in the 30 years since, we have improved those systems by orders of magnitude. We are not hiding because we are weak. We are hiding because we have moved beyond the need for traditional strength." Ven felt a chill run down his spine. "Then why agree to speak with us at all? If you have nothing to fear from the galaxy, why end the silence?" Petra's smile faded. She looked tired suddenly, tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "Because strength is not the same as purpose. We have built wonders here. We have healed our world. We have created things that would have seemed impossible to our ancestors. But we did not evolve to be alone. We are a social species. We need others, not to protect us or provide for us, just to share with, to talk to learn from and teach in return." She placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Ella will grow up in a world of miracles, but she will also grow up in a world that is very small. A single star, a single species. That is not enough for a young mind that wants to understand the universe." Ven thought about the reports he had been sending. The economic collapse, the cultural depression, the suicide rates climbing on worlds that had tasted human creativity and now hungered for more. "The galaxy needs you," he said quietly. "We know," Petra replied. "That is not our concern. Then what is? Whether the galaxy deserves us." Petra's voice was gentle but firm. "You came to us once with open hands, and we welcomed you. Then you came with warships, and we showed you mercy. Now you come with a single old diplomat, asking why we will not speak. Tell me, Ambassador, what should we believe? Which version of the galaxy is real?" Ven had no answer. The silence stretched between them, heavier than any words. "I will tell you what we have decided." Petra continued. "We will give you one more chance. Not because we need you, not because we fear you, but because we remember what it was like to believe that the universe was full of friends, waiting to be met. We want to believe that again. We want our children to grow up knowing that they are part of something larger than themselves." She looked at Ella with a love so deep that it made Ven's heart ache. "But we will not sacrifice our children's future on false hope. If the galaxy cannot be honest with us, if it cannot admit its mistakes and commit to change, then the silence will continue. And this time, it will be forever." Ven spent 3 more days on Earth. He visited schools where children learned to dream. He visited hospitals where diseases that had once seemed incurable were treated with casual ease. He visited studios where artists created things that made him weep with their beauty. And throughout it all, he carried Petra's words with him like a stone in his chest. On his final day, Ella took him to a park overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. The light bridges glowed against the gathering dark. "Will you tell them?" Ella asked. "Will you tell the council what you have seen?" "Yes," Ven said. "I will tell them everything, and will they listen?" He thought about the politicians and the factions and the endless debates. He thought about the pride that had sent warships to cage a young species. He thought about all the ways that old civilizations. The journey back to Nexus Prime took Ambassador Ven 3 weeks. He spent most of that time alone in his cabin, staring at the stars and thinking about a child's question: can people change? When his ship finally docked at the council station, he found a delegation waiting for him. High Counselor Maveth stood at the front, surrounded by representatives from every major faction. They all wore the same expression: hungry, desperate, afraid. "Ambassador," Maveth said, "the council has been waiting. We need your report immediately." "I will address the full assembly," Ven replied. "Every species, every representative. No exceptions, that can be arranged. But surely you can give us some preliminary information, some sense of what you found." Ven looked at the High Counselor. 300 years of service had taught him to read faces, to understand the calculations behind diplomatic smiles. Maveth was not asking for information. He was asking for ammunition, something he could use to strengthen his position before the others heard the truth. "No," Ven said simply. "What I have to say must be heard by everyone at once. There can be no private briefings, no selected leaks, no political preparation. The truth will be spoken once, clearly and without editing." Maveth's smile flickered. "Of course. The council will convene in 2 hours." The great chamber was full when Ven arrived. He had never seen it so crowded. Representatives had come from species that rarely attended. Observers packed the galleries above. Reporters and historians filled every available corner. The galaxy knew that something important was about to happen. Ven walked to the central platform. He carried no notes. He needed none. The images of Earth were burned into his memory with perfect clarity. "I went to humanity's homeworld expecting to find enemies," he began. "I expected anger, preparation for war, the cold machinery of revenge. I found none of these things." The chamber was silent. Every eye was fixed on him. "Instead, I found a civilization that has spent 30 years creating beauty. They have healed their world. They have built structures that our finest engineers cannot explain. They have developed technologies that make our most advanced systems look like children's toys. And they have done all of this while we begged them to speak to us." He paused to let the words sink in. "They are not angry," Ven continued. "That is what I need you to understand. Anger would be easier to deal with. Anger can be negotiated with. Anger eventually burns out. What humanity feels toward us is far more challenging." He looked around the chamber, meeting eyes wherever he could. "They are disappointed. They came to us with open hearts, and we tried to cage them. They showed us mercy, and we learned nothing from it. They have waited 30 years for us to become worthy of their friendship, and they are still waiting." A murmur ran through the assembly. Ambassador Kreth rose from his seat. "You speak of worthiness. What exactly do they want from us? Reparations? Territory? Political concessions?" "Nothing," Ven said. "They want nothing that we can give them. They have everything they need. Their world is paradise. Their technology exceeds our understanding. They could conquer the entire galaxy if they wished, and we would be powerless to stop them." The murmur became a roar. Representatives shouted over each other. Fear rippled through the chamber like waves in a pond. "Silence," High Counselor Maveth commanded. The noise slowly died. "Ambassador, please continue." "They do not want to conquer us," Ven said. "That is my point. They have the power to do anything they want, and what they want is simply to be left alone, to create, to dream, to raise their children in peace. The only thing that might change that is if we give them a reason to believe that the galaxy has changed. And how do we do that?" Elder Thyrus asked. Ven turned to face her. "By being honest. By admitting that what we did was wrong. Not because we fear their power. Not because we need their trade. But because we genuinely understand our mistake and are committed to never repeating it." Ambassador Kreth laughed. It was a bitter sound, full of wounded pride. "You want us to grovel, to beg forgiveness from a species that has only existed for a fraction of our history?" "I want you to tell the truth," Ven replied. His voice was steady, but there was iron underneath. "I am Marathi. I cannot lie. And I am telling you that unless this council can speak to humanity with genuine honesty, the silence will never end." The chamber erupted again. Accusations flew back and forth. Old rivalries resurfaced. Factions that had united against a common enemy now turned on each other. Ven watched the chaos and felt his heart sink. This was what he had feared. The galaxy's leaders were more interested in protecting their positions than in facing the truth. They would argue and debate and form committees and commission studies, and nothing would change. Then something unexpected happened. Ambassador Kreth stood up again. But instead of shouting, he was silent. His face had gone pale. His hands were shaking. "My species," he said quietly. The chamber slowly fell silent as representatives noticed his change in demeanor. "My species once nearly destroyed ourselves in civil war. We fought for 300 years. We burned our own worlds. We killed billions of our own people. And do you know what finally stopped us?" No one spoke. "A child," Kreth said. "A single child walked into the middle of a battlefield and asked why we were fighting. She was killed, of course, shot by soldiers who did not even see her until it was too late. But her question remained. Why were we fighting? What were we hoping to achieve? What kind of future were we building for our children?" He looked around the chamber with eyes that had lost all their arrogance. "We quarantined humanity because we saw ourselves in them. We saw their passion and their energy and their capacity for both creation and destruction. And we were afraid, not of them, of what they reminded us we had once been." The admission hung in the air like smoke after a fire. "I have spent 30 years telling myself that the quarantine was justified," Kreth continued. "That humanity was too dangerous to be allowed freedom, that we were protecting the galaxy. But I knew, even then, that it was a lie. We were not protecting anyone. We were punishing humanity for making us feel small." Elder Thyris rose from her seat. "Ambassador Kreth, what are you saying?" "I am saying what should have been said 30 years ago. I am saying that we were wrong. I am saying that the Velthri hegemony made a terrible mistake, and that we are sorry." The chamber was absolutely silent. In 12,000 years of council history, no representative of the Velthri had ever apologized for anything. "It is not enough," Kreth said. "I know it is not enough, but it is true, and perhaps truth is where healing begins." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, other representatives began to stand. One by one, they spoke, not with prepared statements or political calculations, with confessions. The Malari admitted that they had supported the quarantine because they were jealous of human creativity. The Thoric acknowledged that their warrior culture had felt threatened by a species that could defeat them without fighting. The crystalline singers revealed that they had grown dependent on human art and had blamed humanity for that dependency instead of examining their own emptiness. Hours passed. The confessions continued. Wounds that had festered for decades were opened and examined. Truths that had been buried under layers of pride and fear were finally spoken aloud. Ven watched and listened and felt something he had not felt in centuries. Hope, not certainty. The galaxy was still broken. The damage of 30 years could not be undone in a single night. But something had shifted. Something had cracked open. And through that crack, light was beginning to seep in dot as the session stretched into its 10th hour. A new transmission arrived. Every screen in the chamber activated simultaneously. A human face appeared. It was not a politician or a diplomat. It was an old woman with gray hair and kind eyes. A teacher, perhaps, or a grandmother. Someone who had seen enough of life to know what truly mattered. "We have been listening," she said simply. "We did not expect this. We did not know if you were capable of such honesty. But you have surprised us." The chamber held its breath. "We are not ready to forgive." The woman continued. "Forgiveness takes time. But we are willing to listen. Speak to us, not as politicians, not as representatives of ancient civilizations. Speak to us as people. Tell us who you are. Tell us what you want. Tell us why we should trust you." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was gentle. "We have waited 30 years for this moment. We can wait a little longer, but the waiting must mean something. Show us that you have changed. Show us that you are willing to be honest, not just tonight, but tomorrow and the day after and for all the years to come. That is all we have ever wanted." The truth. The transmission ended. The screens went dark. High Counselor Maveth looked around the chamber at the representatives who had spent the night, confessing their failures and fears. For the first time in his long career, he did not know what to say. Elder Thyrus stepped forward. "They are giving us a chance, a real chance, not to make deals or sign treaties, to be better than we have been. How do we do that?" Someone asked from the gallery. "One truth at a time," Thyrus replied. "One honest word after another. We begin now, and we do not stop. We build a foundation of trust strong enough to support the bridge we want to cross." The chamber was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not empty, not cold. This silence was full of possibility, full of the words that the old teacher's name was Margaret Chen. She had taught elementary school in Geneva for 43 years before retiring. She had never held political office. She had never commanded armies or negotiated treaties. She had spent her life doing something far more important, helping children learn to think for themselves. When humanity had decided to break the silence, they had chosen her to be their voice, not because she was powerful or famous, because she was honest, because she knew how to listen, because she understood that the most important conversations happen between hearts, not governments. Margaret sat in her small apartment, watching the council broadcasts on a screen that showed her the faces of beings from across the galaxy. For hours, she had listened to their confessions, their fears, their regrets, their halting attempts to explain actions that could not truly be explained. Some of what she heard made her angry. Some of it made her sad. But beneath all those emotions, she felt something else, something she had not expected. Recognition. These beings, for all their differences, for all their mistakes, were not so different from the children she had taught. They were afraid of change. They lashed out when they felt threatened. They built walls around themselves and called it strength. They needed someone to show them a better way. Margaret had spent her life doing exactly that. The council session ended just before dawn on Nexus Prime. Across the galaxy, beings watched their screens and wondered what would happen next. Would humanity accept the council's words? Would the silence truly end? Margaret recorded a simple message and sent it to the council. "Thank you for your honesty. We would like to continue this conversation. Send representatives to Earth, as many as you wish, but send them without weapons, without agendas, without prepared speeches. Send them willing to listen and learn. We will do the same." The response was immediate. Ships launched from every corner of the galaxy. Not warships this time. Transport vessels carrying diplomats, scientists, artists, philosophers, anyone who wanted to be part of the first real contact between humanity and the galactic community. Ella was 14 years old when the first delegation arrived. She stood at the Geneva spaceport with her mother, watching vessels from 100 different worlds descend through the clouds. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst. "Are you nervous?" Petra asked. "Yes," Ella admitted. "What if they have not really changed? What if they say the right things but do not mean them?" Petra took her daughter's hand. "Then we will know. Humans are very good at recognizing lies. And if they are lying, we will simply wait some more. We have time, but I do not want to wait anymore," Ella said. "I want to meet them. I want to learn about their worlds. I want to know if the stories are true." "What stories?" "The ones about how different everything used to be. Before the silence, when humans traveled among the stars and made friends everywhere they went." Petra smiled sadly. "Those stories are true. That is why we were so hurt when they tried to cage us. We thought we had found a family among the stars. Instead, we found fear." The first ship landed. Its doors opened, and beings began to emerge. Ella recognized some of them from her studies. The tall, gray-scaled Marathi, the crystalline forms of the singers, the heavy-bodied Thorok with their ceremonial armor, and at the front of the group, walking with the careful dignity of great age, was Ambassador VH. And he saw Ella and stopped. A smile crossed his weathered face. "You have grown," he said. "You came back," Ella replied. "I promised I would." He looked around at the spaceport, at the floating structures and living gardens and all the wonders of human civilization. "I also promised that I would make them here. I hope I have kept that promise as well." Margaret Chen stepped forward. She was smaller than most of the alien visitors, her gray hair pulled back in a simple style. But there was something about her that commanded attention. A stillness, a certainty. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "We have been waiting for you." The days that followed were unlike anything in galactic history. There were no formal negotiations, no treaties drafted in careful language. Instead, there were conversations, thousands of them, millions of them, beings from across the galaxy talking to humans about everything and nothing, sharing meals, exchanging stories, learning to see each other as individuals rather than representatives of ancient civilizations. It was not always easy. Old wounds did not heal overnight. There were arguments. There were misunderstandings. There were moments when the entire project seemed ready to collapse under the weight of accumulated history. But there were also moments of genuine connection. A crystalline singer who discovered a human musician and spent 3 days creating music that neither of them could have imagined alone. A Thoric warrior who found herself weeping at a human children's play, overwhelmed by emotions she had spent her whole life suppressing. A Malari scientist who realized that the humans he had feared were just as curious about the universe as he was. Ambassador Kref came to Earth as part of the second delegation. He had not wanted to come. The shame of what his species had done weighed on him like a physical burden. But he came anyway, because he knew he had to face what he had helped create. He found Ella waiting for him. "You are the one whose people sent the ships," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, my grandmother was alive when the quarantine began. She told me about the fear. She told me about the day when everyone thought the war would start." Kref could not meet her eyes. "I am sorry. I know those words are not enough. You are right. They are not enough." Ella paused. "But they are a beginning. Would you like me to show you the city?" Kref looked up in surprise. "You would do that? After everything? My teacher told me that people are not the worst thing they have ever done. She said that everyone can change if they want it badly enough." Ella held out her hand. "Do you want to change, Ambassador?" Kref took her hand. His scaled skin was rough against her smooth fingers. "I think I am already changing. I think I have been changing since the night we spoke the truth in the council chamber. I just did not realize it until now." They walked through the city together. Kref saw the same wonders that Ven had seen years before. The bridges of light, the floating gardens, the streets that bloomed with life. But he also saw something that Ven had not been able to see. He saw humans and aliens walking together, talking together, laughing together. He saw the beginning of something that had not existed in the galaxy for a very long time: trust. The formal reconciliation took 3 years to complete. Treaties were eventually signed. Trade agreements were eventually negotiated. Political structures were eventually created to manage the new relationship between humanity and the galactic community. But the real reconciliation happened in smaller moments, in conversations over shared meals, in friendships formed across the vast distances between stars, in the slow, patient work of learning to see each other clearly. Elder Thyrus, who had lived for 1,000 years, said it best during the ceremony that marked the official end of the silence. "We came to humanity once with fear," she said. "We came with ships and threats and the arrogance of ancient civilizations. And humanity answered our fear with mercy. They could have destroyed us. They chose not to. That was their first gift." She looked out at the assembled beings, human and alien alike. "Then we came to humanity with pleas. We begged them to speak to us, to save us from the consequences of our own actions. And humanity answered our pleas with silence. That silence taught us more than all our libraries and academies. It taught us that respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned. That was their second gift." Margaret Chen sat in the front row, watching with quiet pride. She had retired from her role as humanity's voice 2 years ago, passing the responsibility to younger hands. But she had come to the ceremony because she wanted to see what 30 years of patience had finally created. "Now humanity offers us a third gift," Thyrus continued. The gift of a second chance. They are opening their worlds to us. They are sharing their dreams with us. They are inviting us to be part of something greater than any of us could build alone. She turned to face the human delegation. We do not deserve this gift. We know that. But we will spend the rest of our existence trying to become worthy of it. That is our promise. That is our hope. That is the future we choose to build together. The applause lasted for a long time, but Margaret barely heard it. She was looking at Ella, now a young woman of 17, standing among the human delegates. The girl who had shown an old diplomat the truth of Earth. The child who had asked if people could change. Ella caught her eye and smiled. Yes. Margaret thought, people can change. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes a willingness to speak honestly and listen carefully, and believe that tomorrow can be better than today. But it is possible. Humanity had proven that by waiting in silence until the galaxy was ready to hear what they had been saying all along. The message had never been complicated. It had never required warships or treaties or political maneuvering to deliver. The message was simple. We will not settle for relationships built on fear. We will not accept a galaxy that treats us with suspicion and calls it wisdom. We deserve